So today we've talked about emotions and how they are powerful somatic experiences. We've differentiated emotions from traits, which are lifelong predispositions, and moods, which are lower intensity than emotions, but last a lot longer as well. We've talked about the impact of emotions and how to use those to understand our emotions better, so how emotions influence our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Lastly, we're going to talk about some common sources of emotions, which include people, places, situations, and substances. The people we interact with influence our emotions in powerful ways. I promise that when you see your mother's name pop up on your phone's caller ID, that you have an emotional reaction to that, right? It's probably the same emotional reaction you've been having since you were 15. But there are certain people that just being with them or interacting with them, it reliably causes or arouses a certain emotion in us. Places do this as well. We have places that influence our emotions. So this is a picture of Horsetooth Reservoir. This is right outside of where I went to grad school. And I spent so much time up here with my friends, just like hanging out in the sun, swimming, drinking beer. It was just such a happy place for me for, 5, 6 years. And I went back to Colorado after I graduated, and I went back to this place, and it was like that feeling was still there. Like as soon as I stood there looking, I was just filled with a sense of like contentment and joy because I had so many positive memories associated with this place. So certain places elicit certain emotions with us as well. Certain situations influence emotions or arouse certain emotions in us. I absolutely hate getting my hair cut. And this is something I just realized about myself. I had like cut my own hair for like 10 years because I hated getting my hair cut so much. And I had told myself I was doing it to save money. But then when I could afford to get haircuts, I started getting haircuts, and I always put it off. I always put it off. And I just hate being stuck in a chair making awkward small talk, and I hate being like, you suck, this is not what I wanted, which inevitably happens. And so I just find that situation of getting my haircut arouses this like anxiety in me. A lot of people have this in regard to like giving feedback or evaluating other people, but it is the situation that reliably arouses a certain emotion in you. Substances have a strong influence on our emotions as well. Emotions are fundamentally a physical experience, and so anything we do that alters that physical chemistry in any way is going to influence our emotions as well. I think one of the most powerful examples of this is caffeine. Most of us drink caffeine without thinking twice about it. Caffeine is a very powerful drug, and if you doubt that, then I encourage you to not drink caffeine for 6 weeks and then drink your normal amount of caffeine, whatever you're drinking now, and you'll be like, oh, this has a powerful influence on me. Coffee is also a good example because sometimes we mistake the physiological impact of coffee for something else. So maybe you've had the experience of you drank too much coffee too quickly and you get really like jittery and like you get anxious and you're like, oh man, and you're worried about something and you're like, oh dude, this thing is going to be such a problem. This thing is going to be such a problem. And then like 2 hours later, when the coffee's worn off and you're feeling yourself, you're like, oh, that thing's not that big a deal. And you were mistaking the physiological arousal, the heart rate, the jittery hands that the coffee had caused. You were mistaking that for an emotion. So that is how substances influence emotions. Another example is food. Food has a really powerful impact on our emotions. We all have been hangry at one point or another where we get in a really bad mood because we don't have enough blood sugar. Likewise, if you've ever had a huge meal, you often feel kind of lethargic and tired afterwards. So the food that we eat impacts our emotions as well. And finally, water. A lot of us do drink coffee all day, and by the end of the day, we have a headache and we're crabby, and it's probably because we're dehydrated. That coffee is a diuretic. You pee out all your water when you drink coffee, and so things like getting enough food, being hydrated, coffee, those can have a powerful influence on our emotional state. Today we talked about emotions, which are value-laden somatic experiences. We differentiated between emotions, traits, and moods. Emotions usually lasting about less than 5 minutes and being very intense. Traits, which are a lifelong predisposition to emotionally react in a certain way. And moods, which are less intense than emotions and can last hours, weeks, or even years. We talked about the impact of emotions and how emotions influence our thoughts, our physical sensations, our feelings, and our behaviors, and how by paying attention to our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, we can get insight into our emotions. And then finally, we talked about the sources of emotions, which include people, places, situations, and substances. So as you can see, there's a lot going on here trying to be self-aware, trying to understand our emotions. And it's actually much more complicated than this, right? It really looked like this, where all of these things are influencing all the other things. And it's not just these clean little arrows going in one direction. All of this is mixing into this emotional soup at any given time. And to make it even more difficult, all of this is going on within the context of culture, and culture has a huge, powerful influence on all of these things as well. And if we go back to the idea of self-awareness, where we have this limited amount of attention, there's this really complicated thing going on, and we can only zoom in and really be aware of it, one little tiny part of it. This is the goal, right? To make this little circle of awareness as large as possible, to get as much awareness or insight into that really complicated internal world as we can. That is our goal. So this is really complicated because this is what's going on with you at all points in time, all the time. And also when we get into effective social interaction and social regulation, this is going on with the other person as well. And you need to be aware of all of those things. And so you can quickly see how being emotionally aware and socially adept becomes incredibly complicated and difficult, and it requires a lot of practice.